Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking a little time. It's both a privilege and an awful lot of fun for me to at least see my colleague again. In the terms of human connections and what's the most important to us, our loved ones, our family, being able to go home safely, and to have my friend, my colleague, my classmate of 2006 in Gabby Giffords here, and then now to stand proudly with an advocate that is making and has been making the irrefutable case that life cannot continue on with gun violence in America the way it's been. Any acceptance of the status quo, and again, people are saying we've scheduled this a while back to have with the Congresswoman's schedule, with our leaders who are up here, and we scheduled this a while back, and people said, oh, you scheduled it around the tragedy in Nashville. No, in America today, any week you schedule will be a tragedy, and that's the absolute horror of this. Again, if you watched that little girl on the bus, and you find yourself tweeting or giving texts about an inanimate object, rather than that little girl and those kids, you need to reevaluate the direction you're going. We've been having this damn conversation too long. And I think the one thing I would tell all of you around here, things are different in Minnesota this year, so we are going to move legislation to make our children safer. We are going to move legislation. As a teacher, a father, as governor, as a member of Congress, as a member of society, I refuse to believe this country is not good enough to do what other countries have done. Simultaneously protected their children while protecting their freedoms and the lawful right to have gun ownership, the right to do what you need to do or feel you can do, but do so in a manner that is respective of society that also has rights. Every one of those children walked into that building with every one of their constitutional rights, and they certainly had their rights to go home safely at the end of the day. So if you're defending this idea that there is supremacy around your right to have and carry and wield or whatever at any given part of the day has never been part of what this country is. I, as a lawful gun owner, someone who's done this my whole life, recognize that what we're proposing, whether it is making sure that there is a significant background checks that make sure we close some of these loopholes, or red flag legislation that all of us should want for our own relatives, knowing that a lot of these gun deaths are suicides in opportunities, and even in the cases we hear early in many of these shootings, family members who knew and have a lawful court-ordered right that doesn't strip people of their rights, but recognizes that if someone is in a situation where they're a danger to themselves or others, we have a responsibility to help them. States across the country have done this, and when they have, and you'll hear from the folks up here, it's lowered the number of deaths. So I just have to say, you're going to hear from a lot of speakers today. I want to take some time at the end to reiterate around the incredible work that was done out in Raymond, Minnesota, in Canandaigua County, and the folks in Princeburg. As you know, we had a train derailment, about 22 cars, 10 of them ethanol cars, several of them punctured and caught on fire. But the situation in the response, both the response from the railroad in Burlington Northern Santa Fe, the sense of urgency they took it by having their CEO, Ms. Farmer, on the ground, and the experts that were out there, along with over 20 agencies, including the state, and calls from the White House prior to 6 a.m. here in dealing with this. I think we're all understand. Public safety is a broad spectrum of things, public safety from rail cars to this, but this public safety issue can no longer be ignored. We responded with 20 agencies. We responded with an entire community. We got people out of their homes and kept them safe because rail cars were burning. Well, rail cars are burning in guns every day in our school. These situations are coming up every day across the country. Until we start responding with the same sense of urgency that we do to these disasters, because when we do it, kept people alive, handled the situation, took responsibility. Oh, and guess what? We've done things to make these less lethal by changing the regulations around what those train cars look like. The same thing can be done with these firearms. So I'm grateful. You're all here to hear from Congresswoman Giffords and the work they've done, but we've got law enforcement up here. We've got legislators up here. We've got moms. We've got dads. We've got brothers. We've got sisters. We've got what the vast majority, poll it, poll these two issues. Nothing polls like this. People get it. They know this is what we should do. Minnesota's going to move forward. We are going to do as we've done for the last few weeks, move things that people have asked for to improve people's lives that make a difference. And on these pieces of legislation, this is a start. And for those critics who say, you won't stop all of these, I don't care if we stop one, that's what we're after. This idea that we have to stop everyone or there's some magic solution that's going to get there, there aren't magic solutions, but there are solutions. They did it in Scotland. They've done it in other countries where they kept their freedoms, kept their rights to own firearms, and protected their children. That needs to come to Minnesota. With that, I'm going to turn it to my partner in this, someone who's been vocal about this, someone who, as we send our child off to school every single day, has been asking us to do the simplest things. And these legislators are here. I cannot express my gratitude enough to the legislators that are here. The First Lady, when we first came to office, asked a very simple thing. Hold a hearing about this. Let's see the data and let's try and improve this. For 4 years, those were rejected. You know what changed? Legislators changed who said, we'll have the hearings, we'll go things forward. First Lady. Go ahead.
I'm going to use the step. Good afternoon. It's nice to see you all. I'm at lots of these events, right? Lots of these moments with the governor and our team, and it's been really an incredible session so far. But rarely do I choose to speak. We have so many articulate people who make points and discuss policy in so many important ways. But today is different because I am speaking on an issue where I hope all of you and everyone who has a chance to watch speaks, because we need every voice in the room, every voice in the state, every voice in every school hallway to make their voice known and heard on this issue. It is time for a change. The importance of taking action against gun violence cannot be understated. As a mother of a high schooler and a college student, I am heartbroken each time we learn of another mass shooting in a school or on a college campus. The other day, I opened a package that came to our house from Amazon, and I wondered who had ordered a package from Amazon. It happened to be our 16-year-old son. And it's an orange shirt, and it says, "No more thoughts and prayers. Let's take action and change policy." He wore that to school yesterday, and he asked if it was clean to wear again today. It wasn't. It wasn't, but I said it will be tomorrow. When 16-year-old young men are wearing shirts, speaking out about this, it's a very strong statement. So I would encourage you to wear your shirt, to bring your voice, to stand with women as I have stood with moms who demand action. For 4 years, asking for a hearing and being told that was impossible. I know that not every single person agrees with every single piece of policy or legislation, but what I would say to our legislators, those brave legislators who stand with us today, and those who are off doing committee work and other things, at the end of our terms, there will be some things that will be really standing out in our mind, and there will be others that will fade away. But as the governor and I have made decisions in our life and tried to model ourselves after people of courage, like Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, we have asked the question, at the end of the day, when there is an issue or a problem, have I done every single thing that I could? Every single thing within my power. Is that the decision I made? Is that what I did? So for members of the House and Senate, on this very issue, on this important issue, the question remains at the end of the day, have we done everything we could? Have we done every single thing we could to keep our children and our schools and one another safe? If that answer is yes, then there will be votes and there will be passage of this really important beginning for Minnesota, for our children, for reclaiming our dignity and our respect for life. So as I close, I would ask you, please join us. Please join us in this very common sense approach to this very significant issue this week, this day, this moment. And I'd like to introduce a champion on issues that are most important to children and families in our state, our Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan.
Thank you so much, First Lady, and good afternoon, everyone. I first want to just take a moment, of course, to thank Gabby Giffords for being here, who has modeled what it means to be a legislative champion and an advocate for gun violence prevention, and also our own champions who are here with us today, Representative Pinto, Representative Frazier, Senator Westland, and my senator, Senator Latz. Thank you for your leadership. I remember when my daughter came home in first grade and she said, Mom, we won the treats, we won the prize. And I said, for what? And she said, we were the most quiet when we did the drill. My soul left my body. And she has had multiple drills since that time. We cannot and we should not put this on the backs of our children. We need to bear responsibility for their safety. And on Monday, after I learned that 6 more innocent lives were taken by gun violence at an elementary school in Nashville, and when I saw that photo, that iconic photo of the little girl terrified and crying in the bus, I sat in my office and I cried. I cried for the parents who didn't know that they would be kissing their child goodbye for the last time. And going through that in my mind every morning, what drop-off looks like for our family. My heart broke for the families and loved ones who did not get to say goodbye. We have let senseless violence carry on for too long. And while we continue to carry the sadness and the grief of another horrific mass shooting, I still feel hopeful knowing that we can take action right now. I am so grateful for the voice and the support of Gabby Giffords. Her resiliency and her courage, her advocacy for gun violence prevention is so powerful. In January, the governor and I rolled out a budget that places children and families at the center and ensures that everyone in Minnesota deserves to feel safe and protected and valued in their community. And let's be clear, gun violence impacts every community in Minnesota. We cannot let this be the reality for our children and families. By expanding background checks and introducing red flag laws to keep guns and weapons out of the hands of people who pose a known risk to themselves and others, we are increasing safety for every Minnesotan. And it is so far, long overdue. We have to get it done. I look forward to working with the legislature to pass these bills to make Minnesota the best place for kids to grow up, where they are safe and where they actually can grow up. These 3 9-year-old children in Nashville were denied that opportunity. We cannot let that happen to anyone else in this state. So we have an incredible partner, another partner in justice who's been working on these issues in his time in the Minnesota House and his time in Congress, and now is our Attorney General, Keith Ellison.
Let me tell you that when Tim Walz and I, us 2 Minnesota guys, went into the United States Congress in 2007, both of us fell in love right away with our friend Gabby Giffords. She was fierce, she was kind, she was smart, she read the bills. And so I'll never forget when she became a victim of gun violence herself. I was at a high school wrestling match in southern Minnesota. And I bet you know where you were, Governor. Because she was precious to us, but we thought that, you know, wow, what a tragedy. What an unthinkable tragedy. But we didn't know then that only a few years later she would be the leading voice for gun violence prevention in America. Nobody would blame Gabby Giffords for just worrying about her own health, but she's worried about the health of our whole society. So bless you and thank you, my friend. And thanks to all of your team, who I had the pleasure to meet yesterday and was so impressed with. You are leading the way for us. And I also want to just say that at the Attorney General's office, there's things we can do. We are using our civil authority to make sure that if you sell a gun, that you sell it legally. And if you don't, we're going to sue you. And I just put that on the record because I'm a gun owner. And I think it is lawful to sell and buy and own guns. But you've got to obey the law when you do it, and you can't do it in a negligent way. Now, I just want to say as I wrap up, there's a part of this legislation, one of the bills, that I just want to draw attention to. After we saw a plethora of violence break out in the Twin Cities, a group of pastors went to a police officer, Inspector Charlie Adams, and they said to Inspector Adams, where are the hot spots in the neighborhood? And they called it 21 days of peace, because there had been a lack of peace with guns. And Inspector Adams said, here, here, and here. And these pastors and their congregations, they went out to some of the most hottest spots in the neighborhood. The governor knows about this. And they sat out there with iPhones and lawn chairs and gospel music. And they literally reduced the violence in those very hot spots. This bill recognizes that there is absolutely, we need police, we need prosecutors, but we also need community. And supporting the community violence intervention is a very important part of this. So I want to thank you, Governor, and our legislators and everyone for recognizing that we will solve this problem through people power. And with that, I want to say, bless you, Gabby. Yeah. And from one gun owner to another, let me introduce you to Bob Mokas of the Giffords Gun Owners for Safety. Bob, take it away.
Is this for you or me? Sorry. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. As one of the original founding members of Minnesota Gun Owners for Safety, I can say with full certainty that the NRA does not speak for all the gun owners. I live in Burnsville, Minnesota, and as a youth, I shot on a rifle team that was sponsored and instructed by NRA instructors and sponsored by the NRA. I shot in many NRA-sponsored events until I reached college age and went off to college. As an adult, I had a job where I had the opportunity to be trained by retired federal air marshals to carry a gun in a cockpit. And so I did that. So here we are again, another day. The flag is at half staff again. Every day in this country, at least 110 people are killed by the hand of a gun. That is 4 Sandy Hooks every single day individually. That flag should be at half-mast every single day for these people because they go through the same pain and grief and suffering that these people in Nashville did. My sister Diane was murdered and that was our Sandy Hook. No other advanced country in the world lives like this, and neither should we. I am a veteran and a gun owner, as I said, and I understand the rights granted by the Constitution come with a certain degree of responsibility. With respect to the Second Amendment, that means that I must learn about the gun and the risk it poses. It means to submit to a background check, and if need be, willingly give up my gun to authorities if it's deemed that my mental capacity has declined. The bill on background checks is supported. The bill on background checks on all gun sales is supported by 92% of Minnesotans. The reports in the aftermath of Nashville shooting indicate that there were clear warning signs, but Tennessee, just as like here in Minnesota, do not have a policy to intervene. In many of the high-profile shootings, as well as the large numbers of suicides by gun, the shooter was known to be in a crisis by family, friends, or others. Both background checks on all gun sales and extreme risk protection order laws have already prevented mass shootings and firearm suicides in red, blue, and purple states. They work. I mentioned that I was a survivor due to my sister being murdered. And I know that responsible gun ownership and common sense gun laws save lives. I would like to draw attention to the preamble of the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. I also know what the Second Amendment says. But I also know that a well-regulated militia does not mean an unregulated armed populace. And those are the words that are in direct contradiction to the preamble of the United States. That preamble tells me that we should be free to go to malls and schools and churches and nightclubs and parks and so on, and to feel safe from gun violence. But we can't. Every day we're burying kids in this country. And that preamble of the Constitution is what set the framework for the Founding Fathers to write the rest of the Constitution. Now they need to interpret it that way. Today's the 89th day of the year, and we've had 130 mass shootings so far. These policy proposals that we have is not an infringement, and it is not an inconvenience on a gun owner to get a background check or comply with red flag laws. Okay. It is their patriotic duty. They're obligated, the patriotic duty, to follow those laws. The real infringement and inconvenience was to the families of Sandy Hook, Uvalde, Orlando, Isla Vista, California, San Bernardino, Las Vegas, Texas, Parkland, Florida. We can go on and on. That's where the real inconvenience is. And it's time to put the lives of our children first on this. Our children's lives should not be the price we pay for that Second Amendment. And as the governor mentioned, no one law is going to save every life. Seatbelts don't save every life in a car, but we did seatbelts. So we just got to one law at a time, and we'll get there. We're going to get there because people are finally becoming aware. So I'd like to close with a quote from Supreme Court Justice Warren Burger in 1991. The gun lobby's interpretation of the Second Amendment is one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, perpetrated on the American people by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime. Thank you, Gabby. supposed to be a list here. The chief. That's all I know.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon. My name is Chief Jay Henthorn from the Richfield Police Department. I'm here today to represent the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association. We, the association, with many Minnesota, support background checks legislation and extreme risk protection order legislation. Current law here in Minnesota has a loophole that allows handgun and semi-automatic military assault rifle sales at gun shows, private transactions, and online purchases to happen without a background check. While all other sales do require background checks, we strongly feel that requiring a background check on all sales and transfers will prevent at least some firearms from going to individuals who are not legally allowed to possess them. While we know this won't prevent all gun violence or gun deaths, we do think it will make a difference. Extreme risk protection orders focus on the relatively rare, but far too often, tragic circumstances where an individual's mental health issues escalate to dangerous behavior. These orders will allow law enforcement or family members to bring evidence to a judge to temporarily separate the person in crisis from firearms when there is substantial evidence that they pose a significant danger to themselves or others by possessing that firearm. Family members and law enforcement are often the first to see the warning signs, and we believe the issuance of a temporary risk protection order is a sensible and reasonable option to address those potential dangerous situations. We have met with law enforcement officials from Florida, Illinois, Connecticut, and Virginia. We have found that extreme risk protection orders work. We've heard the examples. So again, as the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, we support this legislation. Having an incident, a school-related shooting in my jurisdiction, and then 9 or 10 months later having another shooting at a high school football event, I just want to thank the governor for reaching out to me that night and calling me and knowing that we had the resources to handle that situation in a very tragic event. So thank you. I'd like to introduce Ramsey County Attorney John Choi.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Choi, and I have the privilege of being able to serve as the Ramsey County Attorney. And in that role, and I'm also here today on behalf of the Minnesota County Attorneys Association, all 87 elected county attorneys, and our association. And we are people of different perspectives, geography, but for a long time, we have taken the position in favor of both of these bills, strong support for these bills. And again, we have very diverse backgrounds. We see the world in different ways, but we know, because oftentimes it's the prosecutor that has to end up picking up the pieces, having to have those difficult conversations with those that have been impacted by gun violence. And we know that a lot of these situations and these tragic things that happen in our community, they can be prevented. And there are more solutions than just showing up to a crime scene and prosecuting a case. And today, I feel like in Minnesota, with the great leadership that we have here, that we're on the verge of something really important and good, but we can't obviously take anything for granted. And I want to thank the legislators who have been working on this bill, because I think they have done everything. They have done everything that they can to listen to all of the various perspectives and try to make this bill as reasonable as possible. But as the chief had mentioned, we really believe that these bills can make a difference. It won't be the magic solution to end all gun violence, but it can make a difference. And as people have said before, the vast majority of Minnesotans support these reasonable changes to our laws. So in closing, I get the great honor of introducing our guest keynote speaker. And I just want to say that on behalf of just many of us here in Minnesota, we are just so grateful for your leadership and how you have really created a movement. And we had a movement, but you made it so much stronger. And we're so lucky to have you here in the state of Minnesota to give us a lift. So thank you for being here. Yeah. Thank you.
the way. Yeah, we can move that one out. Thanks, Bob. There you go.
Our lives can change so quickly. Mine did when I was shot. But I never gave up hope. I chose to make a new start, to move ahead, to not look back. I'm relearning so many things, how to walk, how to talk, and I'm fighting to make the country safer. It can be so difficult. Losses hurt. Setbacks are hard, but I tell myself, move ahead. I'm finding joy in small things, riding my bike, playing the French horn, going to the gym, laughing with friends. The small things add up. We are living challenging time, but we are up for the challenge. My own recovery has taken years. Many, many people have helped me along the way, and I learned so much. I learned when people care for each other and work together, progress is possible. The world is possible. But change doesn't happen overnight, and we can't do it alone. Join me. Let's move ahead together. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. The Attorney General was right. We went into a class, I think there were 65 of us back in '07. And I think everybody who goes into Congress is in awe. And I can tell you in that class, I think it was kind of a consensus we came upon very quickly about Gabby Giffords. I remember the talk we had on this is we thought she would be the one who would be president out of that class. And I still believe that. I said I think the interesting thing about life is in this tragedy, she's more effective than presidents now. And she's taken her talent. And I think about this for all of you. Keith is right. I can remember exactly where I was. That class, there were a few of us, Keith remembers this. Gabby was really adamant about reaching out to her constituents. She and I had a very similar situation. We came from more rural districts that maybe leaned a little more conservative, but we talked about these issues. And Gabby said, we just need to make ourselves as available as possible. And it was her idea, and I was one of the ones that joined with her, the Congress on the Corner. And we would do our Saturday meet and greets in the produce aisle of the local supermarket. And I'll tell you what, you hear how people talk. You get to see people, oh, you're here, I'm madder than heck about this or this or this. That's what Gabby was doing on that Saturday morning 12 years ago. And I think they'll get forgotten this. She had a 9-year-old constituent whose goal was to come and see her congresswoman, this strong, passionate leader that was making national attention with her voice. That little girl was shot and killed. Gabby's staffer, like these young staffers who work in my office, was there supporting the congresswoman. Gabe died in those shootings. Those are the aftermaths of this. And as Bob said, his Sandy Hook with his beloved sister. So we all know this. We've all been through it. There's a cynicism that's rampant right now in our country anyway with things. But this is one that the folks know. People that have the audacity to, again, send out very inauthentic, oh, we're sorry this happened again, without trying to fix it. We have an obligation to do that. And I know this is a holistic approach. And I just want to name on this issue, too, is as we deal with mental health issues, how dare you blame this on people who are dealing with mental health issues? The number of people, Minnesotans ourselves, all that go through these things, the vast majority of people, that's not it. Say what we know is in this, that other countries deal with mental health issues. Other countries deal with poverty issues. Other countries deal with these things. You know what's different? Hundreds of millions of guns and easy access. That's what's different. So I can't stress enough, and as Bob said, none of these things stop you from owning your firearms. None of these things. You see those pictures of that shooter stalking through the halls with that firearm. It's unacceptable. So I just want to give my great gratitude to the folks who are here. I don't know what to say. Certainly in the job as governor you would do this, but I think even in the job as high school teacher, the number of people I know who've had their relatives shot and killed, each one of your families, I know there's families up here, that their children witnessed shootings. All of us have now. That is not normal. So I'm just right on this right now. No one is challenging. No one wants to take your guns. This is not some debate or something that was thought up by media experts and say, talk about it this way, say it this way, and that's what we'll get. That's not what it is. I tell you what people want. They want their kids to come home safely. They want to be in those malls and in those parks and in those nightclubs. And they can still do the things they need to do with legal firearms. So again, we're going to pass this. It's different for those who say no. I just say, look at what these legislators have already done to improve the lives of Minnesotans, and they're going to continue to do that. So thank you all for here. I'd be glad to take any questions of the folks up here who would like to.
Are you confident you can get those two bills through the Senate?
Yeah, I'll let senators come and speak on this. But I have to tell you, if passed as prologue, the answer is yes, because we're simply getting things done. And I think the passion on this one. So I'd let, if the senator want to speak on it, Senator Latz, he knows this, but they have been leading with courage, with vision.
Boy, it didn't take long for that question to come up, did it? Those of you who have been following this know that for almost the entire tenure of my predecessor in the judiciary, at the conclusion of most of our committee meetings, I would ask when we were going to have hearings on these gun bills. And I kept getting different stories. We're pretty crowded on our agenda. We don't have time for it. Leadership isn't making it a priority. At the end of the day, there were hundreds of hours of unused committee time that we didn't use for anything. We had plenty of time. But it's true, it wasn't a priority.
That's right.
It's a priority now. And we've had hearings in the Senate. And we passed the bills out of the Judiciary Committee. We have 34 members of the Senate. Some of them are new. Some of them are getting their feet under themselves, learning what it's like to be an elected official. And they're learning what it's like to make tough decisions. For some, they look at their districts, and these are not necessarily easy decisions for them. I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to get to 34 on this. And we're going to keep working until we do. And so with the help of the folks behind me, all of the grassroots that are working with them, with the help of the governor and the first lady and the lieutenant governor, Attorney General Ellison, County Attorney Choi, the law enforcement organizations that support these, and probably most importantly, the people of Minnesota that support these. Because if you look in every district in Minnesota, in every legislative district, a strong majority of the people that live there support both of these bills. And when their voices are heard, recognized, understood, it will be an easier decision for every member of the legislature. But we're going to get there, so stick around.
Thank you.
I have a question for Senator Latz. So there were a couple of other bills that were aimed at gun control bills that were being discussed earlier this session, like magazine capacity limits, an age limit on being able to purchase semi-automatic weapons. Those aren't as far as I can tell, those aren't moving forward in the Senate. We're talking about background checks, and we're talking about the red flag law. Is the reason that those aren't moving forward because of senators like Hochschild and Kupek? Is it like, do you have more confidence that these will be something that they can stomach and pass?
For me, and I think I can reflect the views of the people who have been working on these issues for many years, the two bills that we're seeking to advance, the red flag bill and the background check bill, have the most data behind them that say they work to reduce gun violence and gun deaths. They have the broadest identifiable support in the population in Minnesota. Frankly, I don't think we want to be in a position of biting off more than we can chew either. I think it's worth focusing on two effective pieces of legislation and not spreading our, well, you can't avoid gun metaphors in the English language, can you? We don't want to spread our fire too wide, right? So let's concentrate on what we think will be most effective, and I think that's what we've been doing. That's what we've tried to do for a number of years. And there may, let's work on those.
And I would make the case, good legislation where the public wants you. We'll be back with majorities for some years. We'll continue working. So that's my prediction on this. When you work for Minnesota and you get the work done, they'll start to see this. So I appreciate that. Anyone?
Congressman Phillips yesterday said that he now supports having armed guards in schools. You have education in the classroom. Is that the right solution?
Yeah, this one, I'll tell you first and foremost, I certainly don't support arming teachers in any way, and I think we've seen proven this. More guns don't mean better safety always. I want to be clear about this. Listening to the professionals who are in this, understanding individual situations of where things are at, but as a fix on this, we always talked about this. It's a military term to harden the perimeter. We don't need to harden the perimeter to our schools. We need to make sure that guns aren't in our schools and that the shooters are not there. I think that's the way I want to approach it. I do want to be clear, though, we listen to local officials depending on where situations are, but I never think it's a good solution. And I think, again, we are rewiring our children's brains with active shooter drills. We're rewiring their brains of what that safe place is, and for many of our children, that's the safest, the best place they can be. There's other things that we can do. We got to go further upstream. Take any off topic, or we'll take some off. If these folks go, I'll stay for some off topic if you need it. Thank you all. Thank you. Lieutenant Governor and I were just speaking with the legislators, and I want to make note, really good questions, because the practicality of politics and getting things done does matter in this, because we've seen this before, whether it's hoping something gets done or wishing something gets done or running into roadblocks of things getting done. But I think a really fascinating thing here is why do the Republican senators accept no responsibility for this? Because they're the ones that need to be most held accountable, not these senators that come from rural districts and are gun owners. I'm a gun owner. I've said this many times. I don't know how many years. I know 3 years in a row. I rode back from the congressional trap shoot asking the Republicans how it felt to be outshot by me every single time. And I am proud to be a gun owner. I know the ones that I own. I know that I lock them and all the things that we do that don't inconvenience me. My question is, I'm going to make note of this. You are not getting off the hook at the next election if you vote no on this. You are not getting off the hook about us coming out there and making the case that 92% of people, and I don't even care in the most conservative of districts, it's well over 60% of people know this. You are not going to frame this that this is taking your guns, because I'm going to frame it that you're not sticking up for our children, that you're not doing things that, for goodness sakes, Republicans in Florida passed this. Quit it. Quit it. This is not a 34 vote type of situation. You are the ones that need to be asking why you're not going to vote for this. Because these folks are taking hard votes. They're doing what they need to do. But the idea that we're just going to scoot by this, there is going to be a day of reckoning, especially on this one, of you to stand there. You voted no on food for children. You voted no on protecting women's rights to make their own choices. You voted to demonize our children for who they are and their identity. You vote no on this one, you're getting a pretty good record built up. So I just want to put that out there. I think your questions were well pointed, but I hope that the question being asked to the other side, are you going to go home and vote no on this? Are you going to vote no on this? I'm telling you, the hearings weren't held because there's fear of having to vote on it. The hearings weren't held because they know we're right. The hearings weren't held because they know the vast majority of Minnesotans. So you keep that vote off the floor and you don't have to put somebody in a bad situation. The only people that are going to be taking difficult votes on this one are the Republican senators who are going to have to stand up. So I'm going to make sure we're laying down the law on that one. So.
Is there anything else? then to include some of these measures in an omnibus budget bill, or should they ride solo?
Maybe Lieutenant Governor can ask on this one. I'm a legislator too. I tend to, the practicality of this. I know it irritates Minnesotans that they want single issue votes on things. And I hear this from our Republicans. We need single issue votes on everything like that. Well, that changed then, of course, when we wanted to not do the bonding bill because we needed to have tax bills included in that. I'm to be honest with you, I'm agnostic how these things move as long as they move. And I don't know if you want to.
I think
you've done this.
Yes. I think we've proven that this legislature can get things done. I am confident that both of these measures will pass. As a mom who drops her kid off at school every morning, I don't care how it gets done. I just want it to get done, and I think that's how the overwhelming majority of Minnesotans feel too.
Did you get a sense on the ground out in Raymond, or did you get to Raymond or
Yes.
the next town over, that this was 100% alcohol, like corn product?
Yeah.
It's not alcohol mixed with gasoline?
Yeah, and this is great. I think all of us know, rightfully so, there's a really hypersensitive nature to folks after Ohio on a train derailment. I don't think any of you missed, and I know the people out that were sitting in the church in Princeburg who had been evacuated at night missed. The CEO of Burlington Northern and her lead team were on the ground there, first to apologize, and then, as we said, the minute I asked, what does the manifest look like, we had it. We heard from Secretary Buttigieg before 5 a.m. this morning, said that National Transportation Safety Board would be on site, that Burlington Northern was giving everything over. First and foremost, it's to get people out of the initial impact of one of these areas to make sure they're heard. And then I think since Ohio is being absolutely clear what they were breathing. What was burning was ethanol. The train had 22 cars derailed. 10 of these cars were ethanol. The other 12, I believe, were corn syrup. The ground is frozen. So again, I would mention this, and I'm going to make this plug right now because it's interesting how the world all works together. I had the privilege of serving on the rail subcommittee in the Transportation Committee when Jim Oberstar was the chairman. It was Congressman Oberstar from Minnesota who said we need to update our rail cars so that they're puncture proof in a rollover so these flammable materials don't roll up. That's why we now have 117J cars, which are the new ones that are triple bonded inside a bladder. So what you're seeing is a pile of cars jumbled up, full of alcohol, ethanol, two of them, I believe two, punctured. Flames are burning off them. As it burns out, they won't explode, and it's setting on the frozen ground. And so people are not breathing anything toxic. They're out there air monitoring that. The situation is to understand what happens to the water supply to make sure that there is nothing in the location that it's at of running into the municipal water supply. But those are all things that will be monitored. I think what's different about this and what's a good response is these types of situations require industry to work with the federal government, to work with the state, to work with the local and the first responders. This is going to be a clear case, and I'm when the Secretary of Transportation is calling before 5 a.m., when a jet from Fort Worth lands in Wilmer with the CEO of Burlington Northern, it's clear that everybody's taking this a lot more seriously, and I think for the public they heard, and it was great to hear the CEO say we take full responsibility for this. We're deeply sorry for the inconvenience. People were at 2:30 at night, knocks on their door with people in uniform saying, grab your stuff, get out of your house. And we took them over, put them in the church, did all that. And then now the people sitting in that church were there to ask unsolicited or unfiltered questions to myself, to the federal government, to Burlington Northern about what was in there. They said it is ethanol, it's burning out. We'll get the exact amount of what it was. They'll do monitoring, and then big up on the screen on there, Burlington Northern had a number to call for claims. If you incurred any cost, if you had a hotel room, if you got food, if you had to do this, if something was there. So I have to tell you at this point in time, this is the way these responses should go. I have no idea what caused the derailment in the first place. I think those are things we need to know. But this is a clear-cut case of some foresight in those cars and the tankers they are, some incredible, and I can't give enough to this. This is what's great about Minnesota out there. The mayor of Raymond, Mayor Tenson, we had to go find him. He was the firefighter next to the train fighting, because of course he's the fire chief too, as well as the mayor, and then probably was cooking food in town. He and his wife basically were there. But that response, 20 different communities came together, the community, the school, So at this point in time, I believe, and I'll check with this, I believe everybody was supposed to be allowed to be back in their home by around 11 a.m. The cleanup they have to get clearance from the National Transportation Safety Board, who is flying someone out from Washington, before they can move the cars that are in direct. They said what will happen on that is they will pull the cars that aren't burning away from that. You can't put this out with water, so we're not spraying any water on it. They will use foam, and this is now people thinking about it, this is non-PFAS foam that will be sprayed onto the cars that will give them. They will come in and clean this up. They will come in and rebuild the track, and they could have the cars, they said, if they can get permission from National Transportation Safety Board, they think they can have the fires out and the cars moved over to a safe spot within 10 to 12 hours, and over the next couple of days, have this thing cleaned up and operating. So, yeah.
The legislature right now is debating just studying sort of new nuclear technologies or advanced nuclear. It's kind of in the conversation of our moratorium. I just wanted to check in, remind us kind of where you're at on that issue, but also in light of the Monticello leak, just because that's been part of the debate about this. Do you support at least taking a look at advanced or emerging nuclear technology?
No, it's a great question, and I think all of us know as we transition away from carbon fuels, that baseload power that we have to have. There's a couple things first and foremost. Yes, Monticello brought this there, but it's really Prairie Island that's been kind of at the forefront of this discussion. What I've said on this, and in the past I support nuclear power, but we cannot talk about expansion of nuclear power, which I think there is some incredible technologies out there of modular nuclear power. It's licensed in the construction project. They are smaller, they're not as water cooled, they're not as dependent on that. I think there's some much more promising opportunities around nuclear, but we have to have the conversation about the storage. We cannot have above ground cast stored at Prairie Island. And again, there's some racial justice issues on this, that we store our nuclear waste on an indigenous nation. They have asked us to please move that off their nation. We all get power from it. So I think the legislature is doing the right thing. Study this. Be prepared. It's going to be a part of this. But let's have that conversation. I think many of us know that Yucca Mountain, and especially at that time, it was Majority Leader Reid, and that's no secret to anyone, said we weren't going to do Yucca Mountain. The United States needs a long-term repository for nuclear waste until we figure out how to either reprocess, recycle. I know the French do some of this, but I think they're doing the right thing. Study this, put it on there. Let's reignite this conversation. And of course, the tritium leak, certainly unacceptable. We'll find out from the Nuclear Regulatory Agency as they brief us of what happened. But I want to make clear on this that we can't move forward with these things in Minnesota until we solve the storage issue, especially at Prairie Island. Above ground casts of radioactive waste. They have one road in. They have a railroad that crosses them. Just to be clear, had an accident like this happen in Prairie Island, there is no way to get ambulances in and out, and the entire community is trapped on the island. That's the way it is. And they're also on that island is a nuclear plant with above ground storage of nuclear waste. We have to figure that out.
Okay, we've got Veterans Day on the Hill right now.
Got it. All right, we're going straight over?
Thank you.
I think you're right. We held them up. Thanks, everybody. Charlie, you got it. I'm going to grab that book from them. Thanks, Peggy.